Tomes and Tropes podcast, where books and friendships collide. I'm Becca.
And I'm Keri, and we're two friends who love to talk about books. Today, we are talking about The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, Part 6.
Quick reminder that this book is rated 17+, but our adult content will be kept to a minimum.
And we do not do spoilers. Well, other than the ones we are covering in this episode. And since we are in Part 6, go finish reading to Part 6 and come back when you're all done.
We're going to be spoiling a large majority of the book in this.
Yeah.
There's not much left, so.
Yeah.
At least up to Part 6.
True.
It's now time for our one-sentence summaries, where we summarize each chapter of this part in one sentence. Now, in this episode, we're talking about Part 6, which is labeled, Do Not Pretend That This Is Love. There are 20 chapters in this part, so please bear with us. This is going to be a long summary, but we're going to get through it, and we're excited.
We got this.
Part 6, Chapter 1, France, 1914. Addie visits her hometown for the last time, where Luke apologizes for Estelle's tree, even though it wasn't his fault, and he takes her to Paris, where he gives her the ring as a promise that he will come when she calls.
Chapter 2, New York City, 2014. Henry and Addie have the perfect day together at the beach, where an uneasy Addie doesn't want Luke to come and ruin a perfect day by showing up on their anniversary despite having not seen him for 40 years.
Chapter 3, Chicago, 1928. Addie and Luke flirt in the bar when she tells him she would rather be a ghost than belong with him.
Chapter 4, New York City, 2014. As expected, Luke shows up to celebrate the anniversary with Addie, where she finds out he allowed Henry and her to meet, and that Henry's deal is not actually for a lifetime.
Chapter 5, New York City, 2013. Luke saves Henry on the roof, where they make a deal for a year.
Chapter 6, New York City, 2014. Henry shares his story about his curse, and Addie is coming to terms and understanding of both who Henry is and what Luke is doing.
Chapter 7, France, 1944. Luke saves Addie from the jail cell when she is captured for being a spy and brings her to Boston instead.
Chapter 8, New York City, 2014. As determined as ever to save Henry, Addie agrees to meet Luke and celebrate their anniversary, where their war that has been going on for 300 years continues.
Chapter 9, California, 1952. Luke interrupts Addie's date with Max and takes her on their first official date, where they dance together and have their second kiss.
Chapter 10, Everywhere, Nowhere, 1952 to 1968. Despite thinking it would only happen once, Luke comes to her every few months, which turns into every few days, and she realizes she doesn't actually hate him, but she also doesn't love him.
Chapter 11, New York City, 2014. Addie and Luke are still on their date, and they share that they've missed each other, and Addie makes Luke mad by continuing to mention Henry.
I was like, who's Henry? Who's Harry?
Oh my god.
I for a second, my first thought was like, did I miss a lover? Oh my gosh.
Oh my goodness.
Chapter 12, New Orleans, 1970. We finally made it to New Orleans, where Luke says he loves Addie and gives her a gorgeous home of her own.
Chapter 13, New York City, 2014. Luke and Addie go to the rooftop bar, and Addie continues to mention Henry, which causes Luke to make her choose someone for Luke to take instead of Henry, which she does, making Luke laugh and plunging her into the woods.
Chapter 14, New Orleans, 1984. Addie comes to realize that what her and Luke have is not real, and this leads into a huge argument between them that ends with the house burning down.
Chapter 15, New York City, 2014. Luke asks Addie to dance with him, and then admits that Henry was a ploy for her to find the, quote, human love to understand how fragile it is, but he ends up stealing 7 days instead of 1 night, and she runs back to a broken and haggard Henry and agrees to stay with him.
Chapter 16, New York City, August 2014. Henry begins to say his goodbyes as his time comes closer to the end, and Addie is there to provide comfort through it all.
Chapter 17, New York City, September 2014. Henry and Addie spend his last day together where Addie tells him stories, they visit the merchant, and he is okay.
Chapter 18, New York City, September 2014. Because Henry's time is almost done, they are on the roof where he made the deal, where oddly enough, Addie is telling him at this time that he needs to write everything down, including the end of the story that she hasn't told him yet.
Chapter 19, New York City, September 2014. 3 nights until the end, Addie calls upon Luke and admits she is not human anymore, making a deal with Luke that she will be his as long as he wants her by his side.
Chapter 20, New York City, September 2014. Henry pleads with Addie to not do this, and she thanks him and asks that he live his life and let people see who he really is, and he promises to always remember her.
Whew! All the feels.
So many feels.
All the feels. Keri, what did you think about part 6?
Soul-crushing, heartbreaking. I had so many thoughts and feelings. So I was reading this part on a plane, and I was in the middle seat, and I just couldn't move, which was, like, really hard for me.
Oh, no!
I felt like I couldn't fully, like, breathe or just, like, process it fully, because, like, normally when I read a part that's, like, part 6 in a book, I, like, need to pace around for a second or, like, go clean while I process it. I don't know. It's just what I do. But I definitely reread this part because I loved being heartbroken, and I was just traumatized. It was so good. But as I predicted last week, part 5 was definitely a build-up to this part for sure. It was packed. I did love seeing Luke, like, really developing throughout this part.
Yes.
And I did start to feel really bad for him, but I am just more heartbroken for Henry and Addie right now. So we'll see what part 7 holds. Speaking of Henry and Addie, I really loved seeing what they gave to each other. So Henry remembered and Addie saw. This part was just so good. I felt so angsty, so heartbroken, just so torn up for all 3 of our main characters. I have so many words, yet not enough. But yeah, Becca, what did you think?
Okay, so all of that, yes. So I have said before that I do not want this to be an enemies to lovers story. Mm-hmm. I don't want Addie and Luke to end up together. That's not what I want. I still agree. However, think of this podcast episode as my thesis into Luke loving Addie.
Ooh, it's like B finally decided what to do her dissertation about.
Yes, this podcast episode is now my thesis into why I think that Luke actually loves Addie. I am firmly in that camp that Luke loves Addie. Now, I think it's important to note here that just because Luke loves Addie does not mean that Addie loves Luke. And that's where this book, I think, had they loved each other and ended up, I would have been really upset with this part. You know, I would have been really, I think that had we ended on, I think it's chapter like 14, where it's like the everywhere and nowhere. I think had we ended on that part, I would have been very upset. But we didn't. We still have the rest of this part, and we have part 7, which we still have to read. So I think, like, with that, I am okay with this being my thesis that Luke loves Addie.
I love it.
This part hit me in the feels. It truly did.
It really did.
And I'm probably going to be in the minority here, but it hit me in the feels more for Luke than it did for Henry. I was heartbroken for Luke. Again, see later in my thesis. See later in this episode. And I'll share more about this later for sure. But I did feel really sorry for Luke at the end of this chapter, or at the end of this part. And I will we'll dive into it. Also, though, there was so much that happened in this part, and it was so good. And I loved this part. It was so, like you said, Keri, it was so angsty. There were so many answered questions that we had been asking for such a long time. And I just really loved this part. I'm excited to read part 7. And I'm excied to dig into it and see, like, let's read, or let's go through the rest of our thesis and talk through it. So I'm excited.
I can't wait. But before we get into Becca's thesis here, let's talk about our meet cutes. So we actually got to meet one new, like, notable character in part 6, but I am going to do an honorable mention because why not? I make the rules. I can do whatever I want. So we got to meet Max. Thank you for the backup. So Max is a sculptor that Addie meets and is a lover of hers in Los Angeles in 1952. So we know that he is actually a rich artist, which is different from all the other artists that Addie has dated thus far. His family just pays his way. So Max and Addie's date, they had been seeing each other for a few months, and it was ruined when Luke showed up on their date, which was not on their anniversary, and we learned that Luke is jealous of Max.
Yep.
Jealous Shadow Daddy. So, speaking of Shadow Daddy, we got Luke. He is our honorable mention for today's Meet Cutes.
Yes.
He is our jealous lover of Addie. Villain. Sorry. Lover, villain. I don't know.
We'll
All
see.
the things.
We'll see.
Becca is probably going to convince us of a non-villain or less villain. So this is what I'm thinking will happen.
Okay.
It is very similar to how I view him as I viewed Shadow and the Bone. What's his name?
The Darkling?
The Darkling, yeah. Where I am rooting for him, but not really, because he's a villain, you know?
Yeah.
That's how I feel.
Yeah.
We haven't read Shadow of the Bone.
No, we haven't.
So this is just based on the show that we've seen.
If you want us to read Shadow and the Bone, let us know. We are taking recommendations for future books.
Absolutely. But in all seriousness, we do get to see that Luke has a particularly soft side for Addie and is in love with her as much as a god can be.
Yep. Anything
to add, Becca, about Luke that you want to point out since you're our Luke stan here?
I don't... Yes and no. I mean, a lot of what I want to point out, we're going to point out in our quotables. But I do think I liked that you added him here as a meet cute because I really feel like we talked about this in part 5, but I really wanted more of Luke on the page. And we got that in part 5, but we definitely got it in part 6. I felt like part 6 was just our introduction to Luke that we have been having for Henry for a really long time, and that we've been having for Addie for a really long time. So I did like that you added him here, but I don't have anything additional to add to his definition yet. We'll add as we go.
I love it.
But speaking of adding as we go, we are going to be moving on to our quotables next. And just as a reminder, these are the parts and or quotes that we think are notable in this book and things that we want to highlight and things that we want to talk about because we want to talk about them. Because we do what we want.
We're really in the making our own rules vibe today.
We are. I'm digging it.
I love it. We are feeling angsty from this
part.
V. Schwab put us in the feels and we're unable to get out.
She did.
To Noah. Good
but
job.
Just a quick reminder that these quotables are in chronological order. So we do go from chapter 1 all the way to potentially chapter 20. I don't know if we have any chapter 20 quotables, but we do have some chapter 1 quotables.
Mm-hmm. So, chapter 1, this is not a quote. It is just, we're back in Valon for the last time. So, I know I brought this up before in a few episodes, but since it is the last time we'll be back in Valon, I wanted to bring it up because Addie is constantly going back. It is the one place she never wanted to stay, yet she's always going home and always coming back to her family and Estelle and the people that she loved and trying to capture that. So I just, the whole reason she made this deal with Luke was to get out and experience the world, but she always comes back. And I think that just tells us a lot about Addie.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. I do have a chapter 1 quotable, and we might as well call my quotables for this part, "He loves me, he loves me not."
Ooh.
And that is going to be a consistent theme throughout all of my quotables for this part.
I love this.
So we're going to go through it. And yeah, all of my quotables are either evidence that Luke loves Addie or evidence that he doesn't love Addie. So we're going to go through and like, this is not, I would like to say, this is not an exhaustive list. These are just quotables or parts that I think are like big proofs or not proofs. So he loves me not. Okay, so chapter 1, the quote that I have is, "Put it on and I will come." And this is when Luke is giving Addie her father's ring back. And this was so interesting to me because he says in this part, like, this makes us even because he comes back and, like, he even says, like, "I've been visiting you," or like, "I'm here more often than you think I have been," or something like that. And she cannot go visit him. Like, it's not one of those types of things. It's like he holds the power here. Mm-hmm. But as a reminder, we are seeing this whole book through Addie's point of view. We're not getting Luke's point of view here. We are getting Addie's point of view. So I'm firmly in the camp that Luke loves Addie, but Addie does not see it that way. And I think that some of this may be circumstantial and may just be because of how Addie's viewing it, right? And I don't know if we can really... I think we can give Addie the benefit of the doubt that she is a reliable narrator when it comes to facts and timelines and places that she's been and what's actually being said. However, I don't think we can give her the reliability when we are talking about how things were said or the feelings behind it. So like the perception behind what we're saying. So keep that in mind as we're going through this, because I think that will change our perspective a little bit here. Okay, so we are in this instance where Addie gets the ring from Luke. And up until now, every time we've seen the ring, we have been guessing as to what the point of the ring is. We've always thought that when she puts the ring on, it means that she is surrendering to Luke and she is like giving up her deal. And that is not what this ring is. This ring is a promise that if she puts it on, he's going to come to her. And I loved that they use the ring in this case because it's like a ring is like, it is a promise. Like when you get married, like you're vowing things to each other, and a ring is a promise. So I loved that Luke used the ring as a promise in this section. Now, let me back up. So up until now, the ring has been shown in such a negative light. Addie hates that it's always carried with her. She can never lose it, whatever. Now, Luke gives this to Addie after he admits that he is with her more than she thinks. So it's already like, he's already starting to admit that he's with her a lot. And even after he says that, and he says like, now you can like call to me and I'll come. Like he's giving her this promise. She thinks, quote, "It is a challenge. It's a game parading as a gift, not a war so much as a wager, a battle of wills. For her to don the ring, to call on Luke would be to fold, to admit defeat, to surrender." So regardless of what Luke's original intention here was, that's what Addie sees the ring as.
Dang.
And that's what we get the entire book of this ring, this promise that Luke is giving her. This is how it's viewed, the entire book, up until this point.
Crazy. Yeah.
So, anyway, so this ring up until now is a bad thing, but for Luke, it's a peace offering. It's a way for her to make the first move, to be like, hey, Luke, like, I do want to see you, right?
Yeah.
We're gonna pretend like we understand what Luke's going through in this time, because he is lonely. Like, we've established that. But he's lonely, and he wants, like, I also know that it's better to be lonely than to be somewhere where you're not wanted. So I think this is Luke's way of not being where he's not wanted, even though he's lonely, and to not, like, to give her some of the power back in their like, quote, relationship, if that's what we're going to call it.
It's something.
It's something. It's also, he even says later, quote, I hate war. He doesn't like war. He says
crazy.
that multiple times in this part. Multiple times. And Addie is always waging war against him. All the time. So I don't think this is a battle. I don't think it's a battle of wills. I think this is something that he can confirm that she also wants his company. And I also want to highlight that after he gives her the ring, he does not come again for 14 years. He patiently waits for her to say, no, I want you to be there. And the only time he appears without the ring after that I can remember, there are 2 times. The first is at the bar 14 years later when she thinks about putting the ring on. And the second is when he appears on their anniversary at the end of this part with Henry. Every other time up until then, except for their little, like, Everywhere and Nowhere chapter, he comes only when she puts the ring on.
That's crazy.
Which is kind of sad. Like, poor, friendless, lonely Luke.
You've already convinced me. Now I'm already feeling bad for him.
Yeah. Well, I'm not done yet.
Oh, no. Well. I'm still so much of a Henry stan, so you're not even convincing our listeners. You're just working on convincing me right now. I don't know if you knew that, but yeah.
Okay.
You basically are.
Challenge accepted.
I'm not hard to convince. You just give me slight evidence, and I'm like, okay, sure.
Well, we're going to go back and forth. This is not a I love Luke. Well, it is a little bit. This is not an I love Luke thesis. It's a let's look at the evidence and draw our own conclusions thesis.
Okay. Well, that works. Our next quotable is in chapter 3. It's, quote, she has reached for it 100 times, when she is lonely, when she was bored, when she saw a thing of beauty and thought of him. So this is obviously talking about the ring. So this quote goes on to say, like, how stubborn she is and determined to win, but he is too proud to show up. This really stood out to me when I was listening to the audiobook, like, after reading part 6. I was listening to the audiobook the last couple days, and it dawned on me, this is what you would do with a significant other or, like, an ex that you really missed and you're trying not to text.
Yes.
Like, they're, like, kind of toxic to each other. Like, she's thinking about him even though she knows she shouldn't. And, like, she's just lonely. And I love that, like, when she saw a thing of beauty and thought of him, like, it's not just when she's sad and lonely. Like, she cares about Luke, whether she knows it or not.
Yep.
But yeah, I just thought that was funny because it sounded like someone trying not to text their ex. Addie needs a friend to, like, slap her a little bit.
Yeah, she does.
All right, my next quotable is for chapter 4. But there are only 12 hours on a watch, only 12 months in a year, and he couldn't be so foolish. I could have done all of chapter 4 as a quotable, but I can't. I just love it. I just hate it, love it so much.
Yeah. But
we are finally learning how long Henry has. the significance of the watch that, quote, doesn't work, and the lifetime that Henry supposedly has. So this whole chapter just wrecked me. I was shook. I was only like 10 minutes in my flight, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. It took me a lot not to read part 7. I'll just tell you that. But I want this part to be a movie. Like, I want this whole chapter to just be a movie, because I know this scene would make me cry so hard.
Yeah.
I know we always find a way to talk about Finnick, but it reminds me of when I read that part in the book where Finnick dies. Spoiler alert, sorry, but...
Yes.
But, like, in the book, I was, like, really sad, but I didn't cry. But the movie makes me cry every single time. And I know that if this is ever a movie or a show, I would just cry, because I could just see Henry's face and the sadness, and like Luke being triumphant and Addie just being brokenhearted. And this whole chapter, I reread it like 3 times on the plane, because it was just like, this is breaking my heart, but also giving me all the answers I wanted. And I would just like to point out that I guessed that Luke either knew about them or planned this.
You did!
I'm very proud of myself.
You should be.
I had a feeling. And I knew the watch was significant. And I knew that it wasn't, like, not working. I didn't say that because I didn't want to sound silly if I was wrong. But it was a very good and sad chapter.
It was. Okay, so we're going to take a break from He Loves Me Not for this quotable. Sorry, guys. I told you all of them were going to be that, and this one is not. But here we are. So
I took a big sip of water right before you said that. I was trying not to laugh.
So, chapter 5, there's this quote. It says, "And that is where the stranger finds him." Now, this is talking about Luke when Luke finds Henry on the rooftop, when Henry finally tells Addie the real story of the deal that they made. And I'm a bit confused here. And I guess I have a question for you, Keri. Remember when Henry originally told Addie about making the deal? He met Luke in the rain on the front steps of the apartment, and he looked like David, who's Henry's older brother, and we even get like the quote where, like, for a second I thought it was David because he's coming to tell me what a disappointment I am, right? So we get that quote. But in this instance, Henry's on the roof and he like steps over the edge. And does that mean everything that the original story that Henry told was not true? Because not only, like, we thought that it was just like, I made a deal for a lifetime. Like, we thought that was the lie. But was the whole story a lie? And because, like, this is a completely different scenario and situation than that original story.
Interesting. I didn't even catch that. I think I was like, I must have remembered it wrong, but I didn't like catch that it was completely different. I don't know. Maybe like he was on a lot of like substances too, so maybe he doesn't fully remember.
That's
the
true.
Whole story. Like maybe he ended up on the roof after the original encounter with David David or Luke, sorry. I don't know what I was doing. Yeah, that's interesting.
But yeah, just an interesting difference to me that I was like, oh, what else is going on there?
What else, Henry? Or Harry? Sorry.
All right. I'm going to have to keep that in just for that.
All right, chapter 6. She has survived 300 years, and in those centuries, there have been so many times when the ground gave way. Moments when she could not catch her balance or her breath. when the world left her feeling lost, broken, and hopeless. So this is when she's recounting all of the things we read about in the entire book, from the night she made the deal with her and she went to her parents and realized they don't remember her, to Remy giving her the coins, to Estelle's tree falling. And she is mad. All of these 300 years of disappointment and pain, she is mad. She's mad at Luke. She's mad at herself, I'm sure, a little bit, but she's channeling it straight to Luke, which is kind of unfair. Sorry, Luke. But I knew she would be really upset, and I loved getting Addie's vengeance, like angsty, super angry Addie. I love seeing that because I knew when she learned the truth about Henry's deal, because I suspected we weren't getting the full truth with him, but I also love seeing just everything coming to fruition, everything we've read about, all her hurt, her pain. She's ready to explode on Luke, and I'm here for it.
Yep. And we get that explosion.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Chapter 7, we're back to the he loves me nuts. Quote, there is ambition and there is evil, and as much as I'd like to create a roster of my past exploits, your life is the important one right now. Now, we get that quote from Luke, and he's talking to Addie, and this is when Addie finally relents and puts the ring on when she's in the jail cell after being caught as a spy in occupied France. So she puts the ring on to call him for help. And Luke and Addie are verbally sparring here. Like, they're really, like, Addie calls him and then is like, go away. Like, I don't want you. Like, very mixed signals from my girl Addie.
Come on, Addie.
But
it's unfair. They're
verbally sparring again. And again, we get the note that Luke hates wars. We get that quote again in this part. But instead of bragging about his exploits, of which I'm sure he has plenty and he would love to go on and on and on bragging about, he tells her that her life is the important one right now. Now, I don't know this, and I guess this is a question that maybe we can debate, but Luke is a god, right? And he can travel through the darkness. We don't ever really get confirmation that he can time travel, but my assumption is that he probably can. I don't know why I feel that way. I do. I feel like he probably can time travel. So we can't confirm that, but we're going to go with he probably can. He helps her out of a sticky situation, even though he could sit and like help. Like, he doesn't have to help her right at that moment. Like, he could come back earlier, or like they could have this, like, I don't know, like, he doesn't have to sit there and help her in that exact moment, but he does. And he tells her instead, like, we're not going to do this. I'm going to help you out here. And I just want to bring up something that Keri, you said, I think it was part 5 or part 4, but Luke is not a boastful god. And I think we get this here again, right? He's not boastful. He cares about Addie and her life. And this is just another example of that. And I think another point that he loves Addie.
I think contributing to the point that he's not a boastful god, he also, like, whenever in New Orleans, when they were everywhere and nowhere, and whenever he had to, quote, go to work, he basically just said, go to work, and he didn't brag about it or say, like, haha, Addie, I got another soul. So yep. I think he doesn't really, it probably would make him look bad if he did say that to Addie, but I think he doesn't seem like a very boastful, like, look at me kind of god.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I didn't even catch that. Okay, moving on to chapter 9. This is my, if I had a topic sentence, if I had a nail in the coffin for my thesis, this would be it.
This is education Becca here coming out.
Yes, this is my master's thesis coming out.
Future PhD Becca.
Okay. Chapter 9, we get, quote, "Even if everyone you met remembered, I would still know you best." So this whole chapter was a lot of he loves me not. So we got so many things here. But first in the he loves me category, Luke says what I just quoted is like, even if everyone remembered, I would still know you best. He knows her.
Mm-hmm.
You only know people like that if you love them or you hate them. There's no in between. It is a passionate knowing, and that only comes from your greatest love or your greatest enemy. So I guess, well, based on that, I'm going to change my mind a little bit. Maybe this could go both ways. I'm going to let our listeners decide if this is a loves me or loves me not. But this could go, he doesn't love her or he loves her a lot. So, listeners, what do you think? Keri, what do you think?
Oh, that's a good point I didn't think of. When you were talking, I was like, maybe it started as hate, like an enemy type thing. Like, this girl is outsmarting me, and so I need to know her to win. And then maybe it turned into love, because I love the enemies to lovers trope, so I'm always gonna push for that. But no, I think it's probably more love. I'm leaning more towards love.
Okay. So a few lines down, we get this quote. So Addie and him are talking, and she goes, "Do I know you?" And Luke says, quote, "You're the only one who does." Definitely a loves me, full stop. That's all I'm going to say about that one. Then Luke goes into his whole, "I want you, I've always wanted you," blah, 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 which is meh. Keri's over here fanning herself, and I'm like, eh.
I know, we had totally different reactions to that.
I could live without that, to be totally honest. I didn't really know what that meant, because if we're being honest, did he always want her? I don't really know. I think it's interesting because, we don't get confirmation of how he seals deals with anybody else. The closest we get is with Henry, and we don't get Henry ever saying that, Luke kissed Henry. So, I mean, maybe that's, "You're so beautiful, I want to kiss you, so that's how we're going to seal a deal." But I don't think we always got the "I've always wanted you" type thing. So, meh. I could have lived without it. But then Addie says, "You want me as a prize. You only want me as a meal," which is definitely a loves me not. Because I do agree that if we're going to look at it that way, he has always wanted Addie, but he's always wanted Addie as, a meal, as, a prize to, win her soul. Mm-hmm. And Addie is so against Luke in this and thinks he's only doing all of this to make her surrender. So I'm going to side with Addie on this one, and it's a he loves me not. Then Luke changes it up real quick, and they have their kiss, right? The first kiss since the deal that they made in the 1700s. And the quote is, he kisses her like someone tasting poison. Cautiously, carefully, intentionally. Definitely in the he loves me.
Oh, yes.
Definitely there. Lastly,
ooh,
and this one got me. When I was typing this up, I was typing so ferociously. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just found this.
Was this when you, like, texted me that you were, like, Penelope from Criminal Minds?
Yes. I was like, this is, for those of you who don't know, I also love true crime. And I love me some Criminal Minds. And Penelope is their, like, tech wizard who's always, like, typing away. And she's just the best. And she's just, like, click, 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 like, typing away all the time.
I love her.
That was me last night, was doing all of my research on if Luke loves Addie or not. Okay, so lastly, the next morning, Luke says, quote, "It's been so long since I haven't wanted to leave." What? What the heck does that mean? When did he not want to leave before?
Oh.
Has this just
what does it mean?
Literally, has this just been with Addie? Was there someone else that he didn't want to leave before Addie? What does this mean? What does it mean that he hasn't, like, it's been so long since I haven't wanted to leave. Like, so he hasn't wanted to leave before? I am firmly in the camp that this is Luke not wanting to leave Addie, which we're going to put in a point of, he loves me.
I took that quote as he hasn't wanted to leave Addie because Addie is feeling something for him for the first time and not wanting him to leave. That's how I took it. But I am definitely concerned now that I see your point of view.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Scary.
Scary. Okay.
We're done with that part of our thesis.
I wonder if this next quote will be, because I try not to read your notes, so this could be a love me not. Because
okay.
I was really trying to be fully surprised.
Okay. I haven't read this, so I don't know.
Perfect. So the next quotable is from chapter 11. "He is gravity. He is 300 years of history. He is the only constant in her life. The only one who will always, always remember." I think for me, this just shows that, like, this is not as much love that Addie has for Luke as much as need. So I think that's a very different, like, when you want someone if you want someone as your friend or significant other, that's different. But when you need them, that's an entirely different thing. Like, if you're becoming friends with, like, we'll use friends for example. Like, if you're becoming friends with someone because you need something from that person, that's entirely different than wanting to be friends because for friendship's sake. So that's kind of the difference I picked up for him. Little bit of an adult warning, kind of. We're just going to talk quickly about that she does lust for him and want him as a companion in that way. So but she also needs him because he is truly the only one who has remembered her. But I want to point out this quote because this is what Luke has always told her throughout this entire book. The last 300 years, he has been the one to remind her that he's the only one that does remember and that he is the only one to help her and save her and be there for her. So he's almost conditioned her to, like, need him in a way so that because he's always wanted her to rely on him. Because as time went on, he probably knew that it was less likely for her to surrender completely to him because she was figuring out the curse, she was figuring out ways around it to make her mark.
Yep.
So it'd be less likely for her to surrender fully to him because she wouldn't need him as much. But it had to be a reliance on him that moved her. So.
Okay. So here's a question.
Okay.
Luke, like he said, has always reminded Addie that he's the only one that will always remember. When did that become less of a taunt and more of a promise? Because at the beginning, it was a taunt. It's, I'm the only one. Like, you only get me. nobody else is going to remember you. But then it became, I will always remember you.
And,
yeah.
Yeah,
so
I'm not going to finish singing.
When did it turn,
Yeah, that's a great point. I feel like it turned around the time, like, he first brought her into the shadows and moved her around to different places. Or, like, probably before that or during that. Like, when he covered her with the blanket in the cottage in England.
That's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah. I feel like, though, the fact that she realizes that he's the only one who's going to remember him or remember her makes losing Henry even worse.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. So, chapter 13, where this is more of a part than it is a quote, but it's the part when they're at the bar, Luke and Addie are at the rooftop bar, and he says, okay, a soul for a soul, who would you choose for me to take instead of Henry? And what does Addie do? She chooses a soul for Luke to take over Henry. What a crazy turn of events. And I think this is the beginning of the end for Addie here, that, like, she never would have done that. Like, in the 1700s, when she first made that deal, all she wanted was to live. She didn't want to, like, be stuck or anything. But for her to know what it's like to be in a deal with Luke and then to just assign it to a random person, I think is a huge character turn for her, that, like, that's the point that we can point to, saying, like, she has changed. But my question here is, did Addie choose somebody for Luke to take instead of Henry to prove the love that she had for Henry? Or was it her desire to best Luke and prove that she hates him enough that she's going to choose somebody else? What do you think?
I'm leaning more towards the desire to best Luke, because she seems to, like, she says she loves Henry, but she doesn't know if that's what really love is. And she says she's constantly like, this is war, I have to win, like, blah, 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 blah. So I feel like this is just another way for her to best Luke by freeing Henry. So it's because she cares about Henry, but I don't think it's solely because she loves him.
Yeah.
But because, like, she just has this, like, innate desire to beat Luke.
Yep.
And she won't, so.
Yep, I agree. Okay. So we're moving on to chapter 14, and the quote is, "I can make it better," he murmurs. "All you have to do is surrender." This whole chapter was, like, the definition of feminine rage for me. Addie is every woman in a relationship here when they continually have the same argument over and over and over and over and over, and women just get frustrated because it's not the argument, it's the fact that the man doesn't listen or the man says something stupid, and they get frustrated, right? Now, we're gonna get a little vulnerable here, so stay with us.
You got really close. You were like, let's talk. ASMR.
I love my husband. He is a great man. He is so good to me. He is my world. We have a wonderful marriage. With all that said, he has the capability to ruin a perfectly good moment with one little word, one little comment, and he's, like, so good at it. He's so good at ruining good moments.
Love that.
It is such a man thing to do. But I'm curious here if we think that this is actually what Luke did, because I think it could go both ways, right? I don't know, and I don't think we are intended to know if like this whole relationship was actually true for Luke, or if it was just like a farce to get her to surrender. And I think it honestly could go both ways. We get this quote later in the chapter that I'm going to hold on to, and it says, quote, "A fraction of a moment when Luke looks wounded and confused, and she wonders if he meant only what he said. if, but then it is over, the hurt falls from his face, and it passes into shadow. The effect is smooth as it could cross the sun." Just kidding. "The effect is smooth as a cloud across the sun. A grim smile plays across his lips." So here we get he was hurt and then tries to hide it really quickly. And I don't know if that hurt is actually like, oh, I've been playing this game for 20 years at this point. Like, am I actually hurt? Or is this what I'm supposed to be? And then, like, it just falls from his face because he's like, ah, finally I'm done. And then we get this quote, and this quote gave me chills. It says, quote, "And what a tiresome game it's been." Oh my gosh. Literal chills. So my thought here is that I do think that it started off as a game, but it turned into more. So, Keri, do you think he was fully playing a game here, or do you think he slipped up and wanted to cover it to protect his fragile ego?
I think he slipped up. And because I don't think he ever realized that Addie would last this long and be this stubborn and be this persistent. And yeah, I think it was he slipped up here and definitely covered it up so that he wouldn't look so bad, because he's very prideful. We've learned that.
Yes, he's very prideful. Okay. Yep. So, I think we're both firmly in the camp. This is he loves me.
Chapter 14, New Orleans. New Orleans. The fight that was forged over centuries. So this had to happen, this big fight, because like things were just going too well with them.
Yep.
But I mostly wanted to point out here because I have talked since part 1 about New Orleans. Like, I've wanted to know what happens in New Orleans. And I was a little disappointed that it wasn't a lover here, TBH. I really felt like that I was just disappointed that it wasn't Luke.
Yeah.
Or that it was Luke in New Orleans and that's what caused the event. I really wanted something more dramatic. Like, I wanted another significant, important lover of hers.
Yeah.
Because I felt like we only got a few, and I don't know how that would have worked. But it's something I really wanted because I wanted it to make Henry more impactful. Like, I thought, oh, the fire happened because we knew it was a fire.
Yep.
The fire happened because Luke got angry that someone else found her. Like, I wanted that to be kind of like foreshadowing for what's going to happen with Henry. So I wanted to point that out because I was a little disappointed that the New Orleans thing was Luke and it wasn't a new lover. And that our like other lover was Max and he was just kind of thrown in there. So
yeah, no, that makes sense.
I wanted a deeper lover, but it's okay. I'll forgive you, Schwab, because your book is a masterpiece.
But I'm kind of not mad that Addie is the one who started the fire.
Yeah, I'm not mad about that. I'm just like, I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed.
No, that makes sense. Okay, so this is my last point of my thesis. So if y'all are not decided by the end of this one, maybe part 7 will shed some light. But we have chapter 15. We have a quote from chapter 15. And it says, quote, it's coming from Luke talking to Addie. And it says, quote, because it's what you wanted. You were so set upon your need for love, you could not see beyond it. I gave you this. I gave you him. so you could see that love was not worth the space you held for it, the space you kept from me.
Oh.
So this whole part, when I was reading, I was holding my breath because I loved that we got confirmation that Henry was actually a plant for Addie from Luke. Like, I loved that we got that confirmation. We got so many confirmations of a lot of theories that we've been talking about, but that I think is my favorite one because we were so up in the air. Like, I think we were, I don't know about you, Keri, but I was pretty much 50-50 on it. But I loved that we got that confirmation. And how it was presented was just perfection.
Perfect.
But this one was hard for me to fight for Luke for a couple of reasons. And I think this is going to end up in a He Loves Me Not.
Ooh.
This is such a selfish love. And we talk, like, Luke says a couple times, like, love is selfish. Like, love is getting what you need and whatever. And Addie comes back and is like, that's not what love is and blah, 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 blah. But we never get confirmation that, like, she truly understands what love is either. But this is such a selfish love. This was not a gift to Addie. It was a Trojan horse. It was, hey, you get to experience this love, but I'm gonna hurt you with it. And it was to hopefully show that Addie that love was not worth it, and hopefully to give her a reason to be with Luke, or to want to be with Luke, right? However, this is so manipulative again, and I think Luke takes a big L here because his plan totally backfired.
This reminds me of when, in the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, when Choreo just, like, will be like, oh, she's mine. Like, big L, buddy.
Yep. So I guess this could go both ways, right? It could be a he loves me, but he loves me how he can. You know, because I don't think that Luke can truly love Addie in the way that, like, we think about love. But I think he loves her in the way that he can love anybody, you know? Yeah. Okay, so Addie really loved Henry and is willing to lose everything to save him, and even spend the rest of eternity with her enemy. And we explored how they know each other earlier, but I think this is just another example of how Luke knows Addie and did his best to try and manipulate her into being with him. But I think this is so interesting because he says, quote, the space you kept from me. He doesn't know her as well as I think he thinks he knows her, because she was not keeping a space from him for love. I don't think she was. He knew that she was keeping something from him, but I don't think he truly understood what she was keeping from him, because it wasn't love. That was not what was holding Addie back. It was the fact that he was her only choice, and she did not want to accept it.
Yep.
So, again, with the power dynamics here, I don't think Addie could have ever loved Luke, actually. I don't think that ever could have happened. It would have been too close to the Stockholm Syndrome situation. But I don't think we can deny that Luke knows Addie really well and did his best to help her understand that he was the best option and loved her in the way that he could. So I think this could go both ways. It could be a he loves me or he loves me not. It just kind of depends on, are you looking at it from Luke's perspective or are you looking at it from Addie's perspective?
Oh. So is that a loves me? What's your final take, since it's less?
I'm going to say he loves me. Mostly because he is trying so hard. Maybe that's why Addie just can't get on board, because he's trying too hard. But no, I think he's trying so hard to get Addie to, like, be with him, that I do think, like, even though it backfired, I do think this is going to be he loves me, because he hasn't done this for anybody else before.
That's true. That's true.
That's all I got.
All right. My last quotable is from chapter 20, and I really wanted to do so many in between chapter 15 and 20, but I don't want to make you listen to a 3-hour episode. So here we go. Okay, so chapter 20. Think of it as a thank you for seeing me, for showing me what it's like to be seen, to be loved. Now you get a second chance, but you have to let them see you as you are. You have to find people who see you. Life can be very long sometimes, but in the end, it goes so fast. You better live a good life, Henry Strauss. This quote, it destroyed me. I feel like Henry, me and you talked about this on the phone the other day, so the reader or the listeners didn't get to hear this part. I'm sorry, we just really had to talk about it. But Becca and I talked about how Luke has some character development. But when working on this outline, I think Henry had some growth too and some character development because once he made his deal and met Addie and had a relationship with her, he kind of got to see, like, she lived 300 years and he's just trying to live for one more and all that she's done and all that she could and couldn't do. So he's getting to see a different kind of life that he could have lived.
Yeah.
And I think that growth is very important. And he got to be seen truly how he is. And I don't know if Luke meant to give him a gift. And I think it really did give him a gift.
Oh, yeah.
Them both a gift.
That's a good point.
So I think he kind of, in his jealous rage and so focused on getting Addie back, that he kind of forgot about Henry.
Yeah.
And what giving Addie to him would do. But I also think Addie is only giving it to Luke because she cared about Henry and loving him. Having that relationship with Henry really changed her for good, allowing her to be selfless in a way that she hasn't been able to probably in 300 years because she is so selfish because she has to be, like stealing and lying and like going about the world as a ghost kind of. I loved her little monologue in chapter 20, her entire speech, and just a thank you to Henry, who impacted this woman who had lived 300 years and had 7 lives and 7 lovers, that Henry was the one that really pushed her to be selfless and to give in to Luke. Yeah. Which was really, really good. And I felt like, as a reader, her speech was almost like a thank you for me to say thank you to this this story. Like, thank you to Henry and Luke for really giving me an amazing story.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say, is I do think this is partially like a thank you from Schwab to her readers of like, thank you for reading this. Like, go live your life knowing what you know now. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Very much so.
I loved it.
You ready for favorite quotes?
I am. We already talked about my favorite quote. And it is, quote, "And what a tiresome game it's been." Oof. Chills.
We both picked a quote that we mentioned in Chronicles, which I thought was interesting. Mine is, "Life can feel very long sometimes, but in the end it goes fast. So fast."
Nice.
Such a good reminder.
Yeah. Such a good one. Okay, so we are moving on to our timeline recap. We are going to summarize... I don't know if we're going to do a timeline in part 7. I think we have to figure out what else still happens in part 7. I know it's really short. It's only 3 chapters, but I don't know what happens there. So we may do a timeline recap in part 7, but just in case we don't, we're going to do a full timeline recap in this episode, and I'm going to do it real fast. So buckle up.
Buckle up.
As a reminder,
keep your hands and feet inside the vehicle.
Yes, please. As a reminder, these are the significant events. This is not recapping the entire book, just the significant events that we have and in the timeline that it shows. Okay, so today we're revisiting all the way back to part 1 up until the end of part 6. So in 1698, 7-year-old Addie leaves Villon for the first time. And then in 1714, Adeline strikes the deal with the god that answers after dark, our Luke. She learns the rules of her deal, makes her first steal, and gets injured for the first time and heals quickly. So this is really important in her understanding her curse. In 1715, this is the first anniversary where the darkness shows up after she drugs the man. So remember the wine bottle, and he pours the drink. So like he actually poisoned herself, but she like got her on the curse. In 1716, the second anniversary where the darkness walks her back to her house after she steals a dress. In 1719, the fifth anniversary where Luke shows his power by entrapping the servants for dinner. That one is important just because it shows his true power. In 1720, the anniversary where the darkness doesn't show, that's when she like becomes reliant on him, I think, for the first time, and she's like so excited to show him what she's done, and he just doesn't show up, and it like wrecks her. 1724, Addie meets Remy. She steals the Voltaire and starts to learn to read, so this is the first lover we get. In 1751, Luke ruins Madame Joffrey's dinner party. In 1751, we get pointed back to this a couple times, but this is when Addie learns that ideas are wilder. So this is like the first time like she's like, oh, maybe I can use an idea to like move things in motion. That could be the mark that I make on the world.
Yes.
1764, Luke makes Addie feel her age all at once. Terrifying. 1789, Addie travels with Luke through the, quote, dark for the first time. This is what, Keri, I think you're referring back to when, like, I will always remember you started to become a promise rather than a taunt. In 1806, Mateo draws her. In 1827, Luke takes Beethoven's soul and shows Addie, like, his true form. In 1872, Addie sees the opera for the first time. Loved that part. 10 out of 10. In 1899, Luke visits Addie in the cabin in the snow and just tells Addie stories of the world. In 1914, Luke gives Addie the ring back. This is new. So these are the new parts from part 6. So 1914, Luke gives Addie the ring back as a promise that he's going to come when she calls. In 1952, Luke and Addie have their second kiss and their first official date. In 1952 through 1968, Addie and Luke have a relationship. In 1970, Luke gives Addie the house in New Orleans. And in 1984, Luke and Addie argue and burn down the New Orleans house. I just wanted to highlight here, their relationship lasted so long. When I was originally reading it, I thought, 1952 to 68, it's like 15 years, right? Or 16 years. In reality, it lasted from 1952 to 1984. So that's 33 years.
Yeah.
So much longer.
That's a long time.
So much longer. That's like a whole lifetime in and of itself.
Really, though.
Okay, so now we're going to jump 300 years. I'm skipping over the 2013s. That's when Henry makes the deal with Luke. I didn't put that in here because I don't know if we can trust that story. So I don't know if we want to put dates to that.
Interesting.
Okay, so then we go on to March 2014. So we have March 12th. Addie meets Henry, who remembers her, the only person who has since Luke, and she tries to steal a book. March 13th, Addie tries to return the Odyssey, and Henry remembers her, so they go out for drinks and dinner, and Addie is finally able to tell somebody her name. March 14th, Addie and Henry go on their first date. March 15th, Addie wakes up and Henry remembers the night before, and they have their first morning, which was so sweet. March 16th is the dinner party where we're introduced to Robbie. Ugh.
Your bestie.
March 17th, Addie comes clean about the deal she made, and so does Henry, kind of. So that was a big one. And then we start jumping larger amounts of time after this. So in June 11th, 2014, Addie and Luke are at a bar, and Toby comes on stage while Addie and Henry are there. July 4th, 2014, Henry starts acting weird. July 29th, this is the new parts for part 6. July 29th, 2014, Henry and Addie run into Luke on their anniversary, and Addie finds out about Henry's, quote, lifetime, also known as a year. September 1st, 2014, Addie makes her second deal with Luke. So I'll be with you as long as you want me. And then September 4th, 2014 is Henry's last day. And that's all we have.
When you said September 1st, I was like, my mind immediately went to Heather's. I don't know if that's the actual date, but I think it is.
I don't know. I don't remember.
I think it's...
Dear Diary.
To be listening to Heather's. Yes.
Dear Diary.
Just kidding. We don't have time for this. Amazing. Thank you for doing all the timeline recap.
You're welcome. Listeners, thank you for listening. I know that was a lot. We appreciate you.
We do. But now we're going to move on to our timeless treasures, which is where we go over the art pieces at the beginning of each part. Yep. So this is our next to last one. But we are so familiar with this one, actually. We already know this one. Mm-hmm. Because it is title The Dream Girl. Ooh. Artist Toby Marsh. So we're thrown back to Toby.
We love Toby. Woo!
So the date was 2014. The medium is sheet music. The location is on loan from the Pershing family. Description: this piece of original sheet music signed by singer-songwriter Toby Marsh captures the beginnings of the song Dream Girl and was auctioned off as part of the Music Notes annual gala to fund public school arts programs in New York City. While some of the lyrics differ from the final song, the most famous lines, "I'm so afraid that I'll forget her, even though I've only met her in my dreams," are clearly legible in the center of the page. The background is this is largely considered to be the song that launched Marsh's career. The musician has only added to the mythology surrounding the subject by claiming the song came to him over the course of several dreams. "I would wake up with the bars of music in my head," he said in a 2016 interview with Paper Magazine. "I'd find lyrics scribbled on notepads and receipts, but I had no memory of writing them. It was like sleepwalking. Sleep-making, the whole thing was a dream." Marsh denies being under the influence of any drugs at the time. Estimated value, $15,000.
Nice.
I love that they had to clarify that he was not on any substances.
Me too.
That part made me laugh.
Yes.
But as we've seen throughout this whole book, we get a more obvious representation of Addie here. Yeah. It's continually, it's more obvious that it's Addie throughout this entire book. But Toby's song Dream Girl is the one that Addie has taught him without him knowing, that we saw in the first part, but the words are fully his, which shows so much of an impact that Addie can make even without people really knowing. So I think she doesn't even realize how she can leave her mark without even knowing that she's doing it. So she has here left her mark in a musical way, which was really cool because I'm a music girly, so I'm always here for that. Yeah. And has figured out a way to be remembered, even if not fully. So Toby's song describes what has happened from his point of view, and we learned from part 5 that just really like threw her through a loop, and I just love that whole thing. And she has been so smart that she has found these loopholes in the curse and the deal. So I am not ready for this part to be ending. We have one more. We have one more
part. It's okay. I would just like to throw it out to Schwab really quickly that we have done 6 parts on this book, and it's not the longest book, but like we have been able to hold 6 parts up to this point, and like we don't want it to end. Like we could probably do, we could probably still continue to talk about this for a very long time. And I think we will, right? I think Keri and I will. But they're out to Schwab for writing a killer book.
Yes. 10 out of 10. Thanks for breaking my heart.
Okay, our last segment is sevens, and as a reminder, there is a regular occurrence of the sevens in this book. We have the 7 freckles on her face, the 7 parts in the book, the 7 loves she will have, the 7 lives she will lead, the 7 gods watching over her, the 7 stars on the book, or on the cover of the book, the 7 art pieces that we get at the beginning of each chapter, and then the 7 languages. Now, last week we took out the 7 languages because we got confirmation there were 8. I left it in because I am not opposed to taking it out, but if we're going to take things out because we don't hit 7, I think we're going to need to take out a couple other things as well. For example, 7 gods watching over her, we only get Luke. And we have part 7, so maybe we'll be introduced to 6 other gods here, but
It's a lot.
It's a lot, and I doubt it. And it just doesn't seem like something Schwab would do. Like, they don't have any kind of backstory. So, we're going to keep it just for funsies.
For funsies.
Okay, so our additions here is that we do get a 7th lover, Max. Max, we get this in her California life, so that gives us 7 lovers. So just as a reminder, we have Toby, Sam, Henry, Remy, Luke, Mateo, and Max. And then we get 2 new lives. So we get California with Max, and then we get New Orleans with Luke. So we're going to separate those 2 because they are a little bit different. So then that brings us up to 6 lives. So I'm interested to see if we get a 7th in part 7. So we have the 7 lives she will lead. Right now we have France, New York City, Italy, Germany, California, and New Orleans. And I just wanted to note quickly here that the Germany life also includes her time as a spy in occupied France. So like we're covering that whole time frame.
Would you count England if we don't get another life? I mean, she didn't have a lover or like very significant time, but she did have the cottage. So I'm wondering if we throw that in there if part 7 doesn't hold any other lives.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I didn't even think of that. I think England was such a short time for me.
It was.
I don't know. I don't know if we can count it as a life. I think for me, a life is like a longer period of time. I don't know how we're gonna go back and like do that though, because like California, we only get like half a chapter. So
yeah, and I was gonna say she gets her first like home by herself in England, like the cottage that's empty. So I would almost We'll see.
So I guess
We'll circle back.
Would you combine California and New Orleans?
No, because I think that's different. California was with like Max.
Yeah.
And I think her time in New Orleans was completely separate from California.
Okay. I would agree.
Okay.
So yeah,
listeners, let us know.
Yeah, if we don't include England, we have 6. If we do include England, we have 7 right now. So we'll see what chapter or what part 7 holds.
We will see. All right, you ready for Weekly Rex?
Ready.
Okay, so this is where we just get to share just some things that we enjoy that we would recommend to each other. So we're just going to recommend to you. This one's really not for Becca, for me this week because she doesn't have a Switch. But it is a Nintendo Switch controller. It's not like actually owned by Nintendo Switch or anything. It's just like a off-brand one, but it's really good. It like lights up. You can get it in black or white, and you can choose different colors that pop up while you're using the controller, which I really love. So if you're a Switch user and love to play games, definitely recommend that. It's just the perfect vibe for Animal Crossing or Hogwarts Legacy or any other game.
I want to Switch so bad.
It's so fun. I don't play it enough, but I love it.
I want one so bad. I keep telling Liam I want one, but
I need to get you one for your birthday this year.
Nah.
I'll tell him.
Okay. We'll see.
What's your weekly rec?
Yeah, my weekly rec is an Instant Pot. It's a pressure cooker. It's like a 7-in-1, 9-in-1. I don't really remember, but I live and die by my Instant Pot. If I did not have my Instant Pot, we would starve. Now, that's a little bit of a gross exaggeration, so maybe we wouldn't starve, but
we'd be close.
Literally, though, like, it's my favorite thing. It is so nice. I can cook anything and everything in it. It's a pressure cooker. I don't love the slow cooker feature on it, but I love, like, it has a stew feature that's so good. It has, like, I can make rice in it. I can make soup. I make this amazing chicken fajita dish. I make honey teriyaki chicken. I make beef stew. 10 out of 10. I live by it and highly recommend.
I need to use mine. I did open the box the other day.
Oh, good job.
I've had my Instant Pot for 5 years and I've never used it, despite Becca telling me I need to use it for like 3 of those years.
At least once a week we talk about how she needs to use her Instant Pot.
I do. I think I'm going to open it this like soon so I can make yogurt. That's what I want to use it for.
That'll be good.
Yeah.
I've never made yogurt in mine.
I think it'll be pretty easy.
It's supposed to be. I'm not a yogurt girly.
I love yogurt. And I think I would like homemade yogurt.
Agreed.
We'll see. I also like preservatives, so it's fine. Anyways. Thank you so much for listening to us today. For more content, make sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Tomes and Tropes Pod. Or if you have thoughts about this episode, theories, anything about this book, email us at tomesandtropespod@gmail.com.
We'd love to hear your thoughts on, do you think Luke actually loves Addie? What happens in part 7? And is England one of Addie's 7 lives? We'll see you next week. Stay curious.
Keep reading and craft your own story.